What is up, YouTube? My name is Alex. Welcome back to the Lifting Nomad. Today we're in La Ciudad de Mexico, Mexico City, Mexico, staying in the Condesa neighborhood. I've been here the last little while, and it's time for my review of staying here as a digital nomad. So, without further ado, let's get into the video. All right, so when it comes to me evaluating cities, I basically break it down into what I would like to say like 5 categories. So let's try and get a little bit more organized with this. Lifestyle, safety, fitness, cost, and night. And the reason I think those are important to me is those are essentially what I look for in a city. I'm not even gonna talk about weather because honestly, I don't go to cold cities. I think like this Mexico City right now at night where it gets down to like 10 Celsius is like as cold as I would want to go when I'm nomading. I'm gonna be going back to Canada in Toronto in May, which is, you know, as cold as I like to get it in Toronto in the May season. So that's as cold as I like it. So first things first, let's talk about lifestyle. And this one, I do want to be like a little bit kind of controversial on. For me at least, I'm staying in the Condesa neighborhood and I've been to like Roma Norte, Roma Sur, Hippodromo, Polanco, like a lot of the sort of normal neighborhoods that most people go to when they visit Mexico City or when they stay here or expat here or whatever it is. And all these neighborhoods are like unfortunately fairly gentrified, and I think I'm recording this in March of 2023. At this point, it's a little bit unfortunate, and I think it's because a couple things. Like, first of all, we're super close to the US, right? So there's a ton of Americans here just because of the proximity to it. Flights are cheap, they run all the time. It's relatively easy to get to from most cities in the US. A lot of, like pretty much every major city is gonna have a direct flight to Mexico City. So I think that's why there's so many Americans here. And that's not necessarily a bad thing innately, but one of the beauties of like when I was in Buenos Aires was mostly everyone didn't speak English, like very little, if any, right? And in these neighborhoods in Mexico City, I think a lot of people are speaking English by default to like patrons in restaurants or cafes or at the gym, and it makes it so these people, like a lot of these Americans and not just Americans, but anyone who's visiting here don't need to learn Spanish. So like for instance, I was at a bar the other night and like I was ordering drinks and like you all know my Spanish is pretty good, and like a guy comes up beside me, slaps down like a few hundred pesos and says 2 beers, 20% tip, thanks. Like you would do this like literally at home, like not even making an effort to try in Spanish. And it's a little unfortunate because if you go outside of these regions, like you're not gonna be able to communicate that well. And then the other thing is there's kind of like an animosity from the locals towards these tourists who don't even make an effort to speak Spanish. So I've been fortunate through my time throughout South America and Latin America, where engaging with these people first in Spanish, it almost always is gonna be a more positive interaction than if you speak just English first. So my advice, I mean, I've only been taking Spanish classes for like 7 months and I can like converse functionally for pretty much every conversation. I obviously can't do like political debates or write a paper or anything like that, but it's well enough that I can get by on my day-to-day without ever needing to switch to English. And that's what I would say, like if you're gonna be coming down to these cities for an extended period of time, you do need to put the effort in to learn Spanish. It's almost like insulting, right? Like imagine being back in, I don't know, like New York or something, and someone comes into a bagel shop and only speaks Spanish. You'd see like a lot of like Karen types being like, go back to your country, like why don't you speak our language kind of thing, right? So it's the same sort of thing on the other side. It's a sign of like respect towards locals. If you're gonna come to these countries, make sure you learn the language. So that's kind of like a little bit of the negative. On the actual lifestyle piece though, I think it's a very good city, very walkable, very accessible. There's a ton of things to do in Mexico City. Obviously it's massive. There's pretty much everything you could ever want, from nightlife to museums to gyms to restaurants to cafes to architectural sort of phenomenons, like all that. There's just a lot to do here. So I think the lifestyle overall is really conducive to nomads and people who are traveling and potentially looking to expat here. A really good balance of, I would say, like work-life balance. Like people here still run on that kind of LATAM speed that's a little bit more focused on enjoying life and not so like hectic like a lot of North American major cities have, where everyone's essentially just in a rush to get where they're going and then in a rush to get from where they were going to where they were going next. Like it's just a lot of chaos, and for me it's kind of depressing versus that's why I love Latin America, where everything's just a little bit slower. People just kind of take their time on things. There's not such a big rush. It's really just about kind of enjoying your day-to-day, which for me is really good. So I think from the lifestyle perspective, it's a beautiful city. I'm gonna show some videos as well throughout this of my neighborhood Condesa. There's a lot more greenery than I had thought when I came here. When I was coming from Buenos Aires, you know, it was very calm, a lot of greenery throughout all Palermo and Recoleta and Belgrano. And I thought maybe that was just unique, but Mexico City has surprised me with how much green space there is, how many different parks. So this is like Parque España, Parque Mexico, just in this neighborhood that are absolutely massive and beautiful to go walk through. I was getting like a little bit of anxiety today for some reason, so I decided to go sit in the park and read a book, and that definitely helped. So lifestyle-wise, I'm definitely about it. So second thing is safety. Now, like I said, I've been to a lot of Latin American countries at this point, from Peru to Uruguay to Colombia to Argentina to Mexico to I don't know, Honduras to, you know, just a lot of countries down here. So I would say, like, on a safety level, like at least the neighborhoods that I mentioned there, from Condesa to Roma Norte to Polanco to Hippodromo, those are all very, very safe. From what I've seen so far, there is still, like, you know, the general rule, don't go out at 2, 3 a.m. drunk off your tits, stumbling around wearing a Rolex. Like, you know, you're just gonna make yourself an easy target, so no dar papaya, like we always say in Colombia. But overall, I think it's a very safe, clean city. There hasn't been, like, I haven't seen anything, and I'm on doing like this remote working trip with a big group of people right now, and I don't think there's been any sort of issues amongst the like 40 something people that are here. So that's like a good sign. I think if you go to like Centro or Reforma, or more of like the sort of core Mexico City neighborhoods, it's gonna be a lot more chaotic. So you have to be more careful for things like pickpockets, all of that. But overall, I think the safety is pretty good for the major cities in Latin America. So I think you'd be fine as a female solo traveler here, as a male solo traveler here, as whatever you identify as solo traveler here. I think you'd be fine from a safety standpoint. Now, fitness culture here, I actually think is pretty good. Buenos Aires was kind of funny, where they were just a lot of like football focused exercises, and not a lot of people doing like traditional weightlifting, which is what I'm used to coming from Canada. So here, I think it is a little bit more traditional. There's obviously like still a big focus on football, and they actually like watch a lot of baseball and American football here, ironically enough. But it's overall, like, I think a lot more accessible to get into a good gym to do like squat, bench, deadlift, higher level dumbbells. They do still have a ton of like class focused gyms down here, which I think is kind of just like in every major city across the world right now. There's been like a renaissance of like Orange Theory Fitness and F45 style classes. So, you know, if that's your thing, go after it. Not really my style, but, you know, to each their own. But it's been really easy to stay in shape here. I think the food culture, like, obviously this is one of the best food scenes in the world for Mexico City. Like, they have some of the best, like, if you look at the top 50 restaurants, a bunch of them are in Mexico City. So I think that's like on brand. This is the Smart Fit Roma Norte. I've tried a few gyms here. I think this is gonna be the most consistent in my neighborhood. It's very busy, similar to all the Smart Fits I've ever been to, but overall it's like nice, clean. They have like heavy dumbbells. They have a ton of machines. Unfortunately, only one squat rack, but again, thankfully, most people in Latin America don't squat, so it's very easy to get in the squat rack. If you just wait like for like one person, you usually get in. So outside of that, the street food here is, I think, some of the best in the world. Like, outside of the gym, there's like a taco cart, sells tacos for 15 pesos, which is like less than $1, which is amazing. And then you can just get like, you know, a post-workout taco meal right outside the gym. Get them while you walk home, and you're good to go. So overall, I think the fitness culture here, very, very good. I've been going to a Walmart grocery store in the Condesa neighborhood, which is kind of funny, that has had everything I needed. It's like actually been a lot easier to get more like traditional sort of bodybuilding stuff, like chicken breasts and frozen berries and protein and oats. Like, I had a little bit of trouble getting that stuff in Buenos Aires. There wasn't just the big sort of grocery store chains there that were that accessible. But, you know, having a Walmart in my neighborhood, pretty awesome to get like everything you could want from the food department. Fitness wise, I think it's pretty good. Now, of course, I do want to talk about costs as well, and keep in mind, I'm not like ignorant to the fact that I'm very fortunate to be coming here from Canada to any country in Latin America or South America. So, you know, I'm not ignorant to that fact. I think actually cost-wise, it's, I would say like maybe 30% less across the board. Like, really, it's not that different. Of course, like if you're being smart about how you're like you're cooking a lot of meals at home, or you're eating up these taco carts, that kind of thing, you can definitely save more money. But overall, like, there's some fancy restaurants and some fancy bars that are selling drinks for like, you know, 10, 15, $20 Canadian, which is like what I would pay back home in Toronto. So there is a lot of places that I don't think are that different. Like, my gym membership was $40 for a month. Groceries, I'm averaging, like, I would say like 50, 60 bucks a week in food, even in groceries. So it's, you know, it's not that much cheaper to get down here. Ubers are really cheap and Rappi's cheap if you're smart about how you're like where you're ordering from. But overall, I don't really think it's that cheap, at least in these neighborhoods. I'm sure if you went outside of like the normal sort of larger tourist areas, you could save some more money. But then of course, then you're risking like a little bit of the safety levels potentially going down. So that's my thoughts on the cost. Now, nightlife. I'm gonna include like cafe culture, I guess, in this as well. I should have maybe talked about that for like lifestyle, but they do have a ton of outdoor cafes you can work from, coffee shops. There's just a lot of cafes in this neighborhood. It's a very like tranquilo, calm neighborhood. I was expecting a lot more chaos, a lot more cars, but it reminds me a lot of Buenos Aires, honestly. It's like a lot of low buildings, not a lot of traffic, not a lot of chaos. It's just like very easy to walk around and find a place to sit down and sit in a coffee shop and have a coffee and just kind of people watch. It's beautiful for that. So I think the nightlife wise, there's like Roma Norte and Polanco that have a lot of the sort of usual suspects. It's been good. You do have to be a little cognizant of going to super expensive places. So I'll give you an example. I went to Supra Rooftop the other day, like the crew that I'm traveling with down here, and I paid like $150 for drinks for like a couple hours. Like that was an absolute rinse that I would have paid at home. So I was a bit surprised when that was the bill. But just be cognizant of where you're going, and I'm sure there are cheaper places to go, but there are also a lot of expensive places that cater to tourists. So if that's like your thing and you want to go to like the bougie places, you definitely can do it. They have everything here from, I would say it's a little bit earlier of nightlife than Buenos Aires. I'm comparing this to BA because I was in BA for so long, and that's like what I think of as like my ideal future home. If things kind of get going here like 11, 12 and shut down by like 3 or 4, I'm sure there are some later clubs that are open until like 5 or 6, but for the most part, most of the bars are like pretty standard, close at like 2 or 3. Some places like a little bit later, I would guess, but overall like pretty standard to North America, at least in these neighborhoods too. So with that being said, I think the nightlife is pretty awesome. We've met some good people, but like I said, we had it a little bit tarnished from like people being rude and not being very considerate of the fact that you're not in America. So just keep that in mind if you do come down here. Overall, I've loved my time here so far. I think Mexico City's been a beautiful city. It surprised me in a lot of ways of making it more homey and approachable than I had thought. The gentrification is a bit unfortunate. So I would say like if you are coming down here, like definitely try not to be an asshole and be considerate of the fact that you're very fortunate to come where you're coming from. Be respectful to the locals here and try and learn some Spanish. It's gonna take you a long way and you're gonna have an overall better experience if you're coming here if you speak Spanish. That is my opinion on Mexico City. I think it's been great so far. I'm excited to explore it a little bit further, but that's pretty much gonna be the video. If this was useful, feel free to leave a like and a comment in the section below. Always helps the algorithm. But as always, my name's Alex. Welcome back to Lifting Nomad. We'll see you next one. Peace.